Hi. Sorry. Good morning. My computer went, you're on really low battery the moment 10 o'clock hit, of course, which is better than it dying in the middle of service, but sorry for the delay. I am Ginger Yoder, and I get to be your celebrant this morning for our Zoom worship service. And I want to welcome you all to the UUCP Zoom. Let us begin our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and our church are built were not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called the Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Shishumps, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you are joining from us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide, and where they are now. We pause to remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. And now let us join our voices together in our words of welcome, unison chalice lighting, and sung affirmation. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We're hoping that everyone here has a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let us light our chalices together. Hi, we're the Stewarts. I'm Lena.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Lex.
In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land by every tongue.
So good morning. Today is the second in our sermon series focusing on Brene Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart. I want to dig just a little deeper into some of the emotions and experiences that have a big impact on how we feel about ourselves. So today we're going to look at comparison, admiration, reverence, envy, jealousy, resentment, compassion, pity, empathy, sympathy, boundaries, self-compassion, pride, hubris, and humility. The research shows that feeling good about ourselves protects us from depression and anxiety. It helps us stay generous and open-hearted toward others. We want to treat ourselves with kindness and compassion, but we also want to have a right-sized ego rather than one that is bruised on the one hand or inflated on the other. We want to be differentiated without being defended. We want to be empathetic without getting too sucked into other people's drama. In order to have healthy relationships with other people, we need to know who we are and where our edges are. We need to be grounded and clear and strong in our spirit. So that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. And the homily is an interactive one. I'm going to be inviting you to remember how as kids we used to make Valentines? We're going to make Valentines for ourselves. So you might want to have some paper and pens or crayons or other art supplies handy. Maybe you could get them out while we sing our opening hymn. This is Morning Has Come.
Morning has
So just as we do each and every Sunday when we're together in person, we have a moment. We've set aside this time to invite you to engage in the practice of generosity. For those of you who are able to make a financial contribution, you'll notice 3 options for managing the logistics on your screen. We'd invite you either to copy down the information you need or simply go to the website to make a donation. The web address is in your chat. Those of you who are newer or visiting from another part of the country may not be aware that we typically give away all of the cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose missions align with our values. A program called the Month of Sundays. This month, we're raising money for St. Vincent de Paul, whose mission is building a more just world through personal relationships and with service to people in need. There's more information about them in our UUCP newsletter or on their website. If you donate online, you can choose from the drop-down menu where you'd like your money to go. If you're mailing or dropping off a check, simply indicate in the memo line where it is intended for the month of whether it is intended for the month of Sundays or our general fund. In the spirit of love and the continuing work of this church, we will now take some time to practice generosity together as the offertory is played.
So let's enter together now into a time of meditation. This is an excerpt from a piece called Enoughness by Megan Hale. The journey toward enoughness is learning how to take care of your soul. It's learning to lean into the fear and scarcity that you're not enough and offer compassion instead. It's having the courage to embrace your imperfections and allowing yourself to be enough in light of them. Enoughness fills in the holes that carry some of our deepest wounds. Learning to cultivate enoughness means going inward to heal, to flip old messages and life experiences that once made you feel you had to change yourself in order to be loved and to belong. Enoughness requires you to be extremely vulnerable with your insecurities, to uncover these raw emotions. Instead of trying to stuff them away like so many of us do, it's about figuring out how to hold space for them so they can receive the love they so desperately need and to uncover the gifts they hold for us. It is a process of courage combined with a willingness to examine the way you see the world and cultivate deeper authenticity. It often means pulling away from what mainstream culture and media messages suggest about success, happiness, and fulfillment. It most definitely requires you to follow your own path, heed your own desires, and decide for yourself what contentedness, success, and fulfillment mean for you? Let's rest in the silence together for a moment. Our reading this morning comes from Atlas of the Heart. According to researchers Alice Huang and Howard Berenbaum, the opposite of personal insecurity is self-security, which they define as the open and non-judgmental acceptance of one's own weaknesses. What's really interesting about their research findings is that we can have high self-esteem but still be insecure if we're overly critical of our imperfections. Because our self-esteem is an assessment of who we are and what we've accomplished compared to our values and goals, even with high self-esteem, we can still feel insecure if we're self-critical. That is powerful. In initial studies, Huang and Berenbaum found that self-security is positively correlated with self-compassion and negatively correlated with shame-proneness, neuroticism, fear of negative evaluation, self-aggrandizement, and relationship conflict. They also found that people who are more secure are more willing to be vulnerable with others. Their findings suggest that if we are comfortable with our own weaknesses, in other words, if we are self-secure, we are more successful at being emotionally close to others. We're more likely to have healthy relationships. What strikes me here is how feelings of both personal and interpersonal insecurity might cause us to behave in ways that push others away, or to pull away from others for fear of being rejected. It's similar to what we learned about the relationship between perfectionism and disconnection. Without awareness, our fear of being hurt can push us to show up in ways that increase the certainty that we'll be hurt. So I wonder, what are the messages you internalized about yourself as a child? Did you grow up feeling secure and strong in your sense of safety and worth? Or did you grow up feeling sinful, broken, or somehow not enough? Was love something you had to earn by being perfect, or something you knew you deserved, whether or not you received it in appropriate measure? I know that I started out with a pretty mixed bag. On the one hand, I was praised, often and effusively, for being intellectually gifted. And I never doubted that my parents loved me. On the other hand, in all the areas outside of scholastic achievement, I felt at best awkward and at worst completely broken. My parents' love was often conditional, and sometimes our family life felt really scary and dangerous. So I emerged into adulthood able to maintain an appearance of success, but convinced at the core that I was fundamentally unworthy of love. Pretty much my entire spiritual journey as an adult has spiraled around healing that deep wound, learning to love myself and to accept love from others. I've come a long way. I have a ways yet to go, and that's just how life works. What I'd like us to do today is incorporate some of the concepts and insights from Atlas of the Heart into our own self-concept. And I'd like to incorporate an element of playfulness and creativity. So what I'm going to do is make myself a Valentine, and I'd invite you to make yourself one too. Or you could take notes and play later. Now, I'm going to start by making a little shape to represent myself. I kind of wanted to draw a person, but I practiced before church, and I couldn't come up with anything that I liked. I'm not an artist, so I'm actually, this is supposed to represent ourselves. So I just did my initials, and I'm putting those at the center. That's me. Now you might choose a different word, a shape, your name. Maybe you are an artist and you can draw a little person, but put something at the center that represents you. Now, surrounding ourselves For me, surrounding my initials, I'm going to put a heart. So there we go. And what that represents is that I'm choosing to believe that we are all held in love always. So as I'm drawing this heart, I'm just imagining myself held in love. One trick I've talked about before, if this is hard for us, is to imagine someone we love very intensely and without reservation, a child or a niece, a nephew or a grandchild, and then keeping that feeling, we slowly ease them out of our imagination and slide ourselves in. It can help to picture ourselves as a child and then let ourselves grow up. But this is our starting point. Each of us, all of us, held in and surrounded by fierce, unconditional love. Now, of course, we're also surrounded by other people, which means inevitably we compare ourselves to them. Brown writes, comparison is actually not an emotion, but it drives all sorts of big feelings that can affect our relationships and our self-worth. More often than not, social comparison falls outside of our awareness. We don't even know we are doing it. This lack of awareness can lead to us showing up in ways that are hurtful to ourselves or others. Sometimes we compare upward. We look at people who we perceive to be better than we are. And sometimes we compare downward, seeing others as less than. Both upward and downward comparison can inspire us to be better. We can look up to someone and choose to emulate them, or we can see someone struggling and feel grateful and more determined to succeed ourselves. Both upward and downward comparison can also make us feel worse about ourselves. We can get demoralized or discouraged when we see people doing much better than we are, and we can get depressed when we see people doing worse. In general, though, the research shows that frequent comparisons don't make us feel happier or more satisfied in life. Rather, they tend to lead to feelings of fear, anger, shame, and sadness. Brown writes, so the bad news is that our hardwiring makes us default to comparison. It seems to happen to us rather than being our choice. The good news is that we do get to choose how we're going to let it affect us. If we don't want this constant automatic ranking to negatively shape our lives, our relationships, and our future, we need to stay aware enough to know when it's happening and what emotions it's driving. The more we know, the more we can choose connection over comparison. So let's start by thinking about some people we look up to. Admiration is the feeling we get when someone's abilities, accomplishments, or character inspire us. It often leads to us wanting to become a better version of ourselves, but it doesn't generally make us want to be just like them. Meanwhile, reverence is a deeper form of admiration that carries with it a flavor of awe and holiness. I aspire to treating all people with reverence, that Martin Buber I-thou relationship. So let's next add a layer to our Valentine that represents the people we admire or revere. Our teachers, guides, gurus, ancestors, the bright lights who have showed us the way. It could be their names, it could be symbols or shapes, or it could be just a plain line. So I'm gonna, just to kind of be quick and dirty, I'm gonna just do a squiggle around my heart to represent all of the teachers and gurus and guides. Now, a trickier upward comparison is envy. We feel envy when we want something that someone else has, occasionally with a tinge of hostility, so that what that means is not only do we want what they have, but we don't want them to have it. In the envy family, we also have resentment. We feel resentment when we perceive we are the victim of unfairness or injustice. Resentment rises up out of unmet needs or unmet expectations. So when we're resentful, for example, of a coworker who's taking time off, that resentment grows out of our own feelings of exhaustion or burnout. We want to rest, and we see them resting and we resent them for it. Meanwhile, jealousy is a lot like interpersonal resentment. We want something from someone that we see them offering to another person or activity, be it time, attention, love, or affection. One trick for working skillfully with envy, resentment, or jealousy is that when we feel them rising up, we can ask ourselves, what do I need or want that I'm afraid to ask for? What do I need or want, but I'm afraid to ask for? So what I'd ask you to do is bring to mind a situation where you feel one or more of those feelings: envy, resentment, jealousy. What do you need or want that you're afraid to ask for? So here's the thing, it's okay to ask. I'd invite you to now write a word or make a shape or a design somewhere on your Valentine and make it as a commitment to yourself that you're going to ask for what you need in the situation that came to mind. I'm going to make some sort of root-like things at the bottom of my Valentine, just to remind myself that when I have those feelings, I want to follow the feelings down and figure out the source. So when we aren't comparing ourselves to others, we might actually be trying to relate to them. And that leads us to Brown's Places We Go with Others, where she discusses compassion and compassion's near enemy, pity. Also empathy, and empathy's near enemy, sympathy. In this section, she also talks about boundaries and comparative suffering. This section of the book gives all kinds of support to the work of loving other people and loving them well without losing ourselves. Now, as human beings, we evolve to love and connect. When someone we care about is hurting, we feel it in our bodies and in our brains. Compassion means literally to suffer with. Now, pity, the near enemy of compassion, is a defensive move. We separate ourselves from the person by feeling sorry for them instead of feeling pain with them. Human beings are also naturally empathetic. Empathy means in the feeling, which is to say that when someone is feeling something, we all have the capacity to enter into that feeling with them ourselves. We're able to understand what they're feeling and then reflect that understanding back to them. Sympathy is also a defensive move. As Brown puts it, rather than conveying the powerful me too of empathy, it communicates not me, but then adds, but I do feel sorry for you. When we're on the receiving end of sympathy, it most often triggers feelings of shame. So if we choose to avoid pity and sympathy and instead embody fully our capacity for empathy and compassion, how do we keep from losing ourselves? How do we avoid feeling drained, tired, or sad all of the time? How do we avoid compassion fatigue? 2 words, boundaries and self-compassion. Now, growing up in my family, we didn't really do boundaries. I had to learn them professionally in order to survive, but it was always amazing to me the way that capacity to set and hold clear, kind boundaries went completely out the window whenever I went back to spend time with my family of origin. So when I visited last fall, I literally bought and read a book on boundaries on the plane on my way east to visit with my family. And it helped. It actually helped a lot. The definition I like best I've shared before. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself at the same time. The intention behind boundaries is healthy connection. I want to offer compassion, empathy, and love, but without losing or harming myself. My lived experience is that sometimes I can't tell where a boundary should be until it's been crossed. So for me, setting boundaries involves a lot of vulnerability and backtracking. Things like, conversations like when that happened, it hurt my feelings, or when that happened, it felt overwhelming, it made me uncomfortable, or fill in the blank. What did it trigger when the boundary was crossed? I would prefer it if this could be the boundary. Does that work for you? Those conversations can be super awkward. That said, most people respond pretty favorably to this approach. The ones that don't, in my experience, are the ones who get triggered into a shame response. And I recognize that particular phenomenon. What helps keep me from going there is to circle back to reverence, a sense of awe at all the different ways we find to be human. Everyone experiences things differently, and what a gift to have someone communicate clearly with me the way they prefer to be related to. It's like an instruction manual. I love instruction manuals. We can't know what we don't know until someone tells us. So, boundaries, good. Self-compassion, meanwhile, helps us recognize and embrace our own limitations. The old adage about putting our own oxygen mask on first keeps circling back round for a reason. As Leanne shared in the service celebrating our pastoral ministry team, self-compassion, as framed by Krista Neff, is the practice of offering ourselves kindness, embracing our common humanity, and practicing mindfulness, rather than allowing ourselves to sink into over-identification with a particular emotion. I sometimes think about self-compassion as just holding myself to the same standards as I do in terms of caring about myself as I do when I'm communicating with other people. So, in terms of self-talk, would I say something to a dear friend in a similar circumstance? If not, then I'm not allowed to say it to myself. So what I'd invite you to do as you reflect on boundaries and self-compassion is trace or decorate the edges of the shape that represents you. This work is about finding and inhabiting our true shape rather than allowing ourselves to be pushed and pulled by other people or by the culture into a life that chafes or binds. That doesn't feel right or good. Doesn't feel like ours, doesn't feel like our shape. It doesn't feel like the life that's right for us to live. So I'm gonna trace the outline here. Of my initials. Our last stop today are what Brown calls the places we go to self-assess: pride, hubris, and humility. Now, as we reflect on these concepts, we're going to put the final touches on our Valentines. How do we arrive at an accurate assessment of ourselves? Pride has gotten a bit of a bad rap. It's one of the 7 deadly sins, after all. Brown attempts to unravel that by distinguishing between authentic pride and hubris. She writes, "Authentic pride typically has a positive connotation and descriptors that include words like accomplishment, mastery, triumph, confidence, and self-worth. It's positively associated with self-esteem and negatively associated with shame-proneness. If you take in the research across the board, authentic pride, or feeling good about what we accomplish, is a healthy thing. By contrast, hubris is profoundly unhealthy. The higher the hubris, the higher the narcissism and shame-proneness. Hubris is an inflated sense of one's ability tied to the need for dominance. Think puffed up chest, toxic masculinity, male fragility. Which is not to say that women, non-binary, and genderqueer folk aren't vulnerable to hubris, but in terms of the societal context, we see it most often in cisgender males. Brown reports, research led by Jessica Tracy found that for the narcissist, positive views of the self are too essential to leave to the whim of actual accomplishments, for they are what prevent the individual from succumbing to shame and low self-esteem. Instead, narcissists come to experience a globalized hubristic pride, characterized by feelings of arrogance and egotism, which is distinct from the more achievement-based and pro-social authentic pride. As a clinical psychologist friend once told me, the core of narcissism is actually self-loathing. Deep, deep down, narcissists think they are awful, so they construct this fragile, inflated armor that looks like mansplaining or gaslighting or narcissism. When you think about that, my God, what a miserable way to live. Miserable way to live. The antidote to hubris is humility, which Brown defines as openness to new learning combined with a balanced and accurate assessment of our contributions, including our strengths, our imperfections, and opportunities for growth. This is not the "I'm not worthy" self-abasing false humility we see in pop culture, but rather a grounded acceptance of the fact that, hey, I'm still learning. I don't always get it right, but I'm going to keep on trying. So to love ourselves better, we need to become more self-aware and more self-accepting. We need to assess ourselves accurately and protect our individual integrity by refusing to sacrifice our own well-being for the sake of others, while still keeping our hearts open. It's not necessarily easy, but you know what? You are worth it. You are worthy of love and care and health and joy. My prayer for you then, this week and always, is simply this. May you enjoy the journey of discovering who you truly are. May you be brave and skillful as you discover others. And above all, may you remember that you are precious and loved just as you are, every moment of every day. So be it, and so may it be. Let's sing together now. Blue Boat Home. Our closing reading is a poem by Holly Holden. She wrote it in 2016, and it's about body image and body positivity. But I think these sentiments apply to many different areas of our lives. Today, I asked my body what she needed, which is a big deal considering my journey of not really asking that much. I thought she might need more water or protein or greens or yoga or supplements or movement. But as I stood in the shower reflecting on her stretch marks, her roundness where I would like flatness, her softness where I would like firmness, all those conditioned wishes that form a bundle of never quite rightness, she whispered very gently, "Could you just love me like this?" Let's join together in our sung benediction, There is a Love. Please join me in saying the words to embody our chalice flame. We extinguish this chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. Loving ourselves well is the key to being the people that the universe, that the world needs us to be. So be kind to yourselves. Be clear about where your edges are. Be loving with others, but never sacrifice your precious self. Don't doubt your own worth. As you move through this world, I'm surrounding you with a bubble of care and compassion and safety. May you be well. May you be joyful. And may you know you are loved. Those of you who would prefer not to stick around for coffee hour, I'll say goodbye and go in peace. Happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I don't even know who's playing this year, but I know that there's a big game this afternoon. So those of you who are fans, enjoy it. And those of you who want to stick around for coffee hour, we'll put you into breakout rooms in just a moment.